but Volker has a question. He says, Babaji, were the Yoga Sutras written, or were they passed as an oral tradition and then written?
Yes, Volker, they were not written. This is oral tradition, and many years after they were composed, they were written down and published, edited and published in a somewhat responsible way. But this is very much an oral tradition, and when they were finally written down, they were written down using writing as notation, rather because you see there's a difference from something being transcribed, transliterated, or notated as opposed to composed in actual writing. There is a complete difference of nature that you compose very differently orally than you do in writing. So necessarily so, these traditions were oral. They only really work in an oral sense. And Michelle points out that yes, they were not only sung, these Yoga Sutras, as was all this stuff, but much of this material was composed in a very beautiful manner according to the rules and descriptions of aesthetics. Patanjali was especially known for his verse, so that even when describing a philosophical conversation between a teacher and student, it almost reads like a love poem. Maybe he intended it that way. We can think of the Yoga Sutra being broken up into 4 distinct areas. We start with Samadhi Pada, we go on to Sadhana Pada, we have Vibhuti Pada, and finally Kaivalya Pada. Now the first one will be a sort of a description. This will be the setup. This will be where what is introduced is what I believe the main character in for much of the Yoga Sutras, and certainly in Samadhi Pada, which is chitta. And this expression chitta-vritti, this will be the main character. Further on, we will he will discuss well, how do we work with this? And he will give us 2 ways of working with this that warrant a great deal of discussion. The first one is simply abhyasa, which is practice. But what does practice mean? What is it that we're practicing? And its twin, the twin of practice, is vairagya, which is dispassion in terms of how we would translate it into English. But more than dispassion, this is an attitude that reflects the ascetic, that reflects the rishi, that reflects Shiva himself. And this vairagya, this dispassion, goes into many different sort of forms, from the way that one speaks, to the way that one thinks, to the way that one relates to the world, to the way that one dresses. And one of the marks of this, of course, is the ashes, the vibhuti, which becomes, in fact, the name of the 3rd portion of Yoga Sutras. So the final aspect of the first Samadhi Pada of the Yoga Sutra introduces this fascinating concept that we could spend probably a whole session just understanding what's involved here, which is the introduction of this word Ishvara. What does this word Ishvar mean? Now, if you ask any Hindi speaker what Ishvar means, it means God. This is one of the words that's used for God. But he uses it in a very interesting sense that truly reflects the metaphysics of the grammar, the metaphysics of the phonetics. The next section that Patanjali discusses, and he's not discussing, that's not really the word. He is using sutras. This is the man who worships Panini and Panini's use of the sutras, who has declared that to even save half of a short vowel is equivalent to the birth of a son, right? He is writing with brevity and precision in these Yoga Sutras. So when he goes into the sadhana pada, and he describes certain things, this is where we find his description of yoga called Ashtanga, where he gives us the 8 limbs of yoga. And among those 8 limbs is asana. So, for the man who worships brevity, who is concise, who is articulate, he says, what is it? Sukham stiram asanam. This is how he defines asana. And if you will read the various translations of this sutra, Sukham stiram asanam, almost everyone will tell you that Patanjali was informing us that when we make an asana, we should be comfortable. When we assume a posture, it should be a comfortable and pleasant one. And the question, of course, is, did he really need to say that? If somebody is so driven by brevity, where things are not stated unless they absolutely have to be stated, did he really need to say that? That when you sit somewhere or when you adopt a posture, it should be pleasing and comfortable? Well, this is something that we're going to have to discuss. So that so also in the sadhana pada, the other main areas that he's going to talk about is he's going to talk about these kleshas, which are, you could think of as hindrances or obstructions. Curiously, if we relate the 4 padas of these 195 sutras to storytelling, what we find in Act 2 is the conflict. So Patanjali will go on in the 2nd pada to talk about the conflict, which we can describe as kleshas. And then he will go on in the 3rd pada, in the Vibhuti pada, to show us the results of the possibilities and the potentials of the application of sacred speech. And then finally in the Kaivalyam, in the final part, in the conclusion, we will understand how the seer no longer identifies with what is seen, but with the very act of awareness itself. So this will be how we enclose the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali.